Is that on? Okay. Thank you, Pastor, for that welcoming. I want to welcome everyone to tonight's Uwchlan Township Planning Commission informational session on the Lionville Station farm property from the Rockwell Group. Tonight I'm going to let Township Manager Bobby Kagel open up with the guidelines of our meeting this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's loud. Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining us tonight. We appreciate the community's interest in this important development. Before we begin, I just want to note that this meeting is being live streamed on the Township's YouTube channel and will remain on that channel available for viewing at a later time as well. Tonight marks the beginning of what we expect to be a multi-night set of public meetings where the Planning Commission and the community will hear about the plans being considered by Rockwell Downingtown LLC for the school district property on Lionville Station Road. These plans include a conditional use plan submitted on February 3rd for office, manufacturing, and warehouse buildings with the associated loading and parking areas, approximately 100 acres of open space, and a natatorium and nature trail. A zoning amendment proposal to establish a planned residential development zoning overlay on the property, and a tentative planned residential development plan consisting of approximately 570 homes, 66 affordable apartments, approximately 100 acres of open space, and a natatorium and nature trail. I just want to note that that particular plan, the residential plan, has not yet been formally submitted to the township. All the documents submitted to the township were required under the agreement of sale between Rockwell and the Downingtown Area School District. The conditional use plan is currently subject to an indefinite extension granted by Rockwell, waiving the timeline requirements to hold a hearing dictated in the municipality's planning code. Township staff and Rockwell have been meeting regularly since December to review and discuss both plans, with the majority of our discussions focusing on the residential plan. I want to be very clear the township has not taken a position on which use of the property is the better plan. There are multiple pros and multiple cons of each plan. It's important to everyone involved in this potential development to educate the public about each plan, the pros and cons, and receive feedback on what is presented. Tonight, Rockwell will present both the conditional use plan and the residential plan. The Planning Commission and the Township consultants will be able to ask questions of Rockwell about each of their plans and for Rockwell to respond or follow up. To help facilitate the presentation and make it easy to follow along, we'll take one plan at a time. So the conditional use plan first, then followed by the residential plan. And after each plan is presented, we'll have a grouping of questions based on different subject areas, where the Planning Commission or the Township consultants would like to highlight something or ask additional questions or gather additional information. Those subject areas are on land use zoning and the comprehensive plan, traffic and transportation, stormwater management and drainage, site design and layout, environmental impact and open space, community impact, including municipal services and public safety, utilities and infrastructure, and any legal or procedural subjects. Here tonight on behalf of the Township are Tara Giordano, our building and zoning official, Dan Daly, our Township's engineer, Matt Kosich, the Township's traffic engineer, Casey Lalonde, representing the Township's sewer engineer, Bill Gladden and Carl Russick, representing French and Pickering Creek Trust, which is the Township's environmental and open space consultant for the project, and then Mark Freed, our Township solicitor, will be joining us shortly. We anticipate the presentation tonight will take the full time allotted and expect to take several breaks throughout the night to let folks get up and stretch their legs. Once the presentations and questions are complete, or we come to 10 o'clock tonight, we'll continue the meeting and reconvene on Thursday, June 19th at 6 p.m. here at the church. During the meeting on the 19th, any follow-up presentation and questions and answers will be able to take place, and then we'll be able to open the floor to public comments. If necessary, we'll continue the meeting again until Thursday, June 26th at 6 p.m. here at the church. I want to reiterate at the conclusion of these meetings, there will be no official action taken by the Planning Commission. These meetings and presentations are purely informational and to allow for informal feedback to the developer on their plans and to help inform the Planning Commission, Township staff, and the Board of Supervisors. Before we begin the presentations, I want to briefly outline the public comment process so everyone knows what to expect, and I'll re-review this process again at the start of the public comment process. Speakers will need to identify themselves and municipality prior to speaking, and they're encouraged to include their street name. Groups, businesses, or organizations are encouraged to designate one person to present on their behalf. Residents and taxpayers of other municipalities are asked to give Uwchlan Township residents and taxpayers an opportunity to provide public comment first. Comments should be directed at commission members and not to township staff or Rockwell staff. Due to the expected volume of comments, responses to public comments will likely not be able to be provided. Comments from the public will be used as considerations in future plan refinements and decisions. As a reminder, the public comment period is not an opportunity for questions and answers. In lieu of spoken public comment, members of the public are welcome to submit written comments after having attended or watched the presentations via email to lsr@uwchlan.com between June 20th and July 1st. These comments will be provided to the Planning Commission members in Rockwell after July 1st for their consideration in future refinements and decisions. An acknowledgement of receipt will be auto-generated for each email received. Each speaker will be given a total of 3 minutes to give their comment. A countdown timer will be displayed to help speakers monitor their time. And due to the expected volume of comments, speakers are asked to adhere to no more than 3 minutes and provide any additional comments they were unable to say via email at lsr@uwchlan.com. Speakers cannot use signs, props, advertisements, or video while providing comments. Speakers should limit repetitive comments and, when appropriate, simply acknowledge agreement with a previous speaker's comment or position. And while the public has the right to make critical remarks, the public does not have the right to disrupt meetings. In cases of serious disruption, the meeting may be adjourned or other actions taken to resolve the disruption. As the meeting is subject to recording, a speaker's voice may be recorded and publicly broadcast, and their name and municipality may appear in meeting minutes. And finally, I just want to take one more minute to talk about process. As I said before, the Planning Commission will not be taking any official action at the conclusion of these meetings. Based on the feedback received from this meeting, the developer will decide whether they wish to proceed with the conditional use plan or proceed with the residential plan. Regardless of which plan Rockwell decides to proceed with, hearings will likely need to take place towards the end of August or sometime in September. The township intends to hold these hearings as special meetings in locations with adequate capacity, such as the church here. These hearings will not take place during regularly scheduled Planning Commission meetings nor Board of Supervisor meetings. We encourage residents to follow the township's Facebook profile, watch the township website, and sign up for e-alerts to be notified when the hearings are scheduled. We thank you all again for your time and participation in this important discussion. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to Rockwell to begin with the conditional use plan.
Hello, my name is Greg Lingo. I'm the owner of Rockwell Development Group. We're a locally based real estate development company. Our office is in Wayne, Pennsylvania, and we build developments from the Delaware beaches to the Jersey beaches up to kind of Princeton area to Pottstown, in that circle, the tri-state area. I've been doing this for 32 years, I'm going on my 32nd year. One of the first projects that I was a project manager with way back was in Uwchlan Township, the Williamsburg community off of 282. First house my wife and I moved to was in Downingtown. We know this area really well. We are really thankful to have been selected by the school district to ultimately be the developer of this magnificent piece of ground. We are thankful for the Planning Commission for having this special meeting, thankful to the township for organizing it, and thankful to everybody's input, because we've held over 70 meetings and discussions with adjacent neighbors about the property. And each of those discussions, and no doubt each of the discussions and comments that we hear tonight, have been thought through, they've been thoughtful, and they've resulted in a better plan. A lot of things, as we're talking about the plan tonight, a lot of improvements that we've made to it since we first started talking to the school district are a result of these meetings that we've held. We want people to give us feedback. We think that that's important. We have, our contract with the school district is in the public domain. So anybody can refer to that. We're paying a lot of money for the property. So if somebody said, hey, we'll let you build one house here, that obviously we won't be able to afford to do that. We initially went through, after putting it under contract, we hired Chester Valley Engineers to work on a conditional use plan which is permitted under the current zoning. In that plan, it was an industrial flex warehouse type plan, which we'll talk about tonight. I want to also introduce Andrew here, who handles our land approvals as well as land improvements. He's a local guy. A little bit about me, 3 daughters. One just graduated high school last week. That was my youngest. I have a civil engineering degree, undergrad, went to Villanova for a master's after that, and have been in this industry my whole life. So I look forward to the next few days and the next few months of trying to refine the plan so that it's not going to be something that anyone says that's exactly what I want, but we're hoping that through this dialogue we'll be able to accomplish something that's better than where we started. And that's fully expect that that's the case.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Andrew Kabovsek, and I work with Greg at Rockwell. Just want to thank the commission and the township staff and the community for coming out tonight. I am a little bit about me. My background is in civil engineering. I have a degree in civil engineering, and I've been working in real estate for about 15 years now. I, along with my wife and my 2 daughters, have been residents in the community since 2018. They attend the local schools here, so we very much love this community. So this project is particularly special to me because it's right around the corner from my home. And just want to thank everyone for the dialogue that we've had so far, the township, for navigating this project and the open dialogue with everyone. So we look forward to continuing this on and walking, kind of going along this journey together. I also want to take a minute to just introduce some of our professionals that are here tonight. We have Lou Calagreco from Riley Ripert Calagreco, our land use attorney. We have Rick Stratton from Chester Valley Engineers. We have Jeff Miller from Evans Mill Environmental, who is our sewer engineer. And then we also have Eric Ostemchuk from TPD, who is our traffic engineer as well.
So we'll start with the conditional use plan that we submitted in February. This was as part of our deal with Downingtown School District. We had benchmarks in terms of timing that we had to file certain plans. This was the first plan that we submitted. A few things, part of our deal with Downingtown School District is that we would provide on the property a natatorium and that we would cause the natatorium to be built. So as you're orienting here, Lionville Station Road works your way up here, Turnpike and 113 is kind of down here. This natatorium, there's a need in the school district right now that there isn't a swimming facility. And some of the adjacent school districts, Great Valley, O&J, don't have one either. So it was part of our agreement that we would have this natatorium constructed. We have recently reached an agreement with Phil Aquatics to be the operator of this. So essentially we would be getting this approved, and then Phil Aquatics is going to raise the money to build that facility. And then that facility would give the Downingtown School District students would have priority for the swim lanes, and then after that, potentially other school districts. I have here, if you wouldn't mind just coming up to talk a little bit about, we have Jeff here from Phil Aquatics, just to kind of give you a quick overview.
I'm Jeff Meyer. I'm the executive director of Phil Aquatics. And we were fortunate to put this together with Greg and Rockwell. It is our intent to bring to the site a community-based, world-class health, wellness, and aquatic center. And detailed information, a lot of information is still being developed as to what we'll accomplish. However, you can go to philaquatics.org, which is our website, which will give you a lot of information about what our hopes and plans are and what we'd like to accomplish after this has all been approved and put in place by Rockwell. Thank you. You
guys able to see the plan? Okay, you can see the plan there. Part of just some other highlights from this plan, we were not changing the orientation of Lionville Station Road. We have in the aquatic center, the parking lot there would have a dual purpose. It would also serve as a trailhead for a passive recreational trail that would navigate through this area. I would envision that being like wood chips type thing. And then property up in the upper right-hand corner. The property in the upper right-hand corner leave as open space as well. Rick, do you have some comments you want to make to this plan? This is Rick Stratton from Chester Valley Engineers.
Thank you, Greg. Yes, Rick Stratton, Chester Valley Engineers. I'm also a township resident. So the conditional use plan shows a number of industrial buildings and associated parking. Those loading docks for those industrial buildings are situated on the backs of the buildings here. And then each building has its own associated parking for employees. We believe there's more parking here than what's needed, but that can be reduced if there isn't a need for so much parking. We feel there is an ability to reduce the parking here. There is one road coming out here on Lionville Station Road, and this would be a new road, one large facility in the back. But all these are the industrial buildings, and then there's the natatorium down here. And then, as Greg mentioned, Lionville Station Road will stay as is. And the thought is to limit traffic to this location on 113.
One note I just want to make on this plan is there are some historic farmhouses on the property that we're showing on here that we intend to preserve and restore based on our architectural historic impact study that we're going to have done on the property as well. So next I'd like to have Eric from TPD come up and just speak briefly to the traffic study that was done on this plan.
Good evening. Eric Ostenchuk with TPD. We prepared a conditional use traffic study for the conditional use plan that you see here. As was noted, the idea would be to limit the truck traffic and employee traffic for the site out to the 113 intersection. And when we do that, we want to certainly make that enticing, so we would look to improve that intersection through some realignment, adding capacity at that location, and have the abilities for the trucks to make that turn to head out to 100, 30 up to the Turnpike.
As part of the, Pennsylvania has a program in place where sewer allocation is allotted to certain properties, typically based upon the zoning. This property, before we put it under agreement through this Pennsylvania Act 537 plan, was allotted a certain amount of gallons per day to be kind of coming from this property. We have our sewer engineer here as well that could talk a little bit to the overall, the number of gallons per day that are allotted for the property, as well as just talking, there's multiple different directions we could connect the sewer to. That hasn't been totally flushed out yet.
So I'm Jeff Meller, Evans Mill Environmental. We're right up the road in Chester Springs. Another Villanova grad. Sorry. So sewer for this project. I really don't remember the total flow that was allocated to this project, but I will say this, that since this was a conditional use plan for an industrial use, maybe warehouses, it's almost impossible at this point in time to determine what the flows would be because it really depends on the user. We worked on one project up on 78. It was an Amazon warehouse, and their flows were extremely low per square foot, less than 1/10 of a gallon per square foot because everything was automated. That doesn't necessarily impact the traffic, but it does mean that the sewer flow is really low. I'd have to go back through my notes because I honestly don't remember what they were.
The sewer that is allocated to the property is 120,500 gallons per day
That's way more than we need.
for this use. So as we as we're showing kind of the evolution of our plans, we were working in lockstep with Jeff to make sure that we had enough sewer allocated to the property without asking for additional sewer. Now, I know that Downingtown sewer treatment plant is intended to be upgraded over time, and I know that Uwchlan Township has some allotment that they'll be receiving from that improvement to the facility, but we're not planning on having any of that impact our uses, that we think we can control what's already been allotted on the property. And if there are off-site improvements that are needed for us to tie into the sewer, that would be our responsibility to do so. So we wouldn't be looking to the township to pay that. Thank you. It might make sense, if it's okay with you, Bobby, for us to just leaf through the different iterations and then drop back to here for questions and comment. Are you okay with that? Yeah, well, also just kind of, well, we could stay on this plan for now. Okay. Okay, we're happy to answer questions.
So right now, the property is zoned for the warehouses, correct?
You have commercial zoning, correct.
Okay.
Institution, you have commercial.
Then my next question would be traffic. This, whatever we do on this property, we have to come up with a better plan than an extra turn lane to get vehicles out on 113. That's my first comment about traffic. So, I don't. What other options do we have to do?
Yep, good question. So I think in addition to the turning lane on 113, and that's based upon the number that's traffic planning and design has done the study based upon their expected use here. In the industrial use, we are forbidding truck traffic. They really couldn't go to the north there on Lionville Station Road. So that would all be down, like relegated down to the 113 area. But I don't remember if there were any other recommendations from a traffic standpoint other than preventing truck traffic north and the 113.
It was the restriction and then the improvements at the 113 intersection that were identified. It's similar to the work that was done on Cherie Boulevard as you're approaching 100 with the dual right turn lanes coming out of there, because most, if not all of that truck traffic is going to be destined for Route 100 and the Turnpike coming out right there. Yes, sorry. There it is. We anticipate improving the 113 Lionville Station Road, similar to what was done at Cherie Boulevard and Route 100, because most, if not all, of the truck traffic will be destined for Route 100 and the Turnpike, and that is the way that they would get out to that location.
Are there any, besides that, in one intersection at 113 and Lionville Station Road, what about the intersection at 100 and 113? That is already a very poorly performing intersection.
Yes, 100 and 113 essentially has dual left turn lanes in every direction there, as well as right turn lanes, except for, I believe, the westbound approach of 113. So essentially that intersection is built to the highest standards that it possibly could. When you look at the peak hour traffic or the rush hour traffic added from this use, it doesn't impact it to the point where we would need to develop improvements there. This type of use has what would be considered off-peak traffic generation, earlier shifts in the day. The truck drivers like to get started much earlier in the day than your typical rush hour that you would be going to school and work, so that rush hour impact would not be felt at that intersection.
Can you say that's true of all different potential uses for industrial tenants on a site like this without knowing what tenants would be in these sorts of spaces?
What the information that we utilize, the data that's utilized for these uses and how the traffic is generated for those uses is based on existing developments, warehouse developments. PennDOT has taken painstaking measures recently to try to develop a best approach to estimating traffic for these types of uses. So they've provided guidance which we follow to provide that evaluation. Certainly, as a end user comes on, there may need to be an evaluation at that point. There was a similar approach taken over at the Cherie Boulevard warehouse development because that was built on spec as well, whereas they have end users, then evaluation that needs to occur at that time.
Dennis, I have a comment. Understanding that our responsibility is to make sure this project is planning viable, not economically viable for Rockwell. With that said, the Township Master Plan has exits for that property through Haywood Boulevard as part of what the master plan says. What investigations have you done to that? That is already industrial park. That would get you out to 100 in a cleaner fashion. You are hard done by at 113 and 100. You have very little places to go. You're hard against the Turnpike on one side. You can't put anybody else down north on Lionville Station Road, as you know. That road won't handle it. So where are you at with alternative routes? Or even carrying the traffic over at Lionville Station Road and all going out Haywood?
I recognize the master plan that's in place for that connection over to Haywood. Certainly, we've looked at it. This project and the site doesn't abut against that end of Haywood, so they'd have to cross another person's property, which they currently don't have the rights to do, which is why we've focused our efforts to improving the intersection of 100 and 113, because that is within the control of what can be done by the development team.
You will further say that your truck traffic will only go southbound on Lionville Station Road, but all the employee traffic is going to be a lot of trouble both directions, correct?
Yes, and that's to service people who essentially live to the north and would work at the site.
And
so
we have a
local
start
residents.
on an estimate for trips?
Sure. Peak hour trips with regard to this conditional use plan has in place for the warehouse component approximately 250 to 270 or so rush hour, peak hour trips that would occur. And of those, it would be 30 to 45 trucks during those time periods.
Okay. I didn't realize you're not going to have to submit that for some time yet, but I just was interested in how far along you were with TPD on that.
I'm sorry.
I said, I realize you don't have to submit that to us for some time yet, but I was interested where you are with it.
The conditional use study, I believe, was submitted with the conditional use application.
Okay.
What the steps would be is if we move to a conditional use hearing, we would have to provide testimony towards that study. I assume that your township traffic engineer, Bowman, would be evaluating that and providing comments and guidance on that. To date, we haven't received any guidance from the township or reviews from them, but I anticipate either through conditional use or the land development process, we would work in concert with them and PennDOT to develop, viable solutions.
All right. Well, I got the mic done.
Yep. Talking to it, Bill? Make sure you're talking to the mic so they can hear you. Okay.
As far as the natatorium goes, I guess this is a request by the school district?
Yes, the natatorium was something that we negotiated with the school district at the point of sale.
Okay. So, in my mind, it looks like, and that natatorium accrues to the benefit of the school district first and foremost throughout the entire agreement of sale as I read it.
So yeah, the school district, so we will cause the natatorium to be built. Phil Aquatics will actually be the operator and owner of the property. We're going to donate that property to them. And then for $0.
To who, excuse me?
Phil Aquatics. You heard Jeff Meyer talk earlier, introducing himself. So we'll donate the property to Phil Aquatics, and then they'll be the owner-operator of it. And they have to give priority to Downingtown School District students for the lanes before going outside beyond that.
Understanding that no other school districts have a natatorium in this area, and understanding that really it seems to me to be a somewhat circumspect way of circumventing the prevailing rate laws as they apply to a school district.
I don't really know what you mean, sorry.
If the school district were to enter into building that natatorium themselves, they would be under Davis-Bacon Act, federal law, prevailing wage laws, all of those things that happen. If they let you build it, they get the benefit of not having to do that.
And we won't be building it either. Phil Aquatics will be building it. But I don't know that it was created, I don't know that the idea of the swim center was created as a way to circumvent laws. I think it's a benefit for the community we were comfortable with.
And the Rockwell Downingtown LLC is what?
That's a single-purpose LLC for the purpose of this project. It's owned 100% by Rockwell Development Group, which is owned 100% by me.
Okay, thank you.
I was curious of what feedback you got from the community that you incorporated in your plan.
So in this first, we're going to be able to get to some of the question was, what community feedback was incorporated into this plan? And in this plan, this was our initial submission. So from the point of early February when we submitted this, there's been tons of modifications to our plan that we're excited to share with you based upon neighbor and community input. I will tell you that in this plan, it's really the open space, a certain percentage of open space and the passive recreation through some of the open space. But beyond that, we submitted something that was code compliant in our estimation.
Okay, so when you're going through, it'd be nice to point out what you heard from the community, because that's very important for us.
Great.
That this project is community approved as well. So if you can highlight those details, that would be great for us.
That'd be great, yeah. I think the township would prefer us to stick on this plan first, but we will absolutely highlight all of the things we've incorporated from our meetings. And we know that we're going to have other things that other ideas that are going to be generated from these meetings that we'll be continuing to incorporate. Yeah.
Make sure I'm on here. Excuse me, Matt Kosach with Bowman. We're the Township Traffic Consultant. We have some draft comments together, and I just thought I'd throw some of those out here for consideration, and Eric and you guys can respond. First question would be just the feasibility of the second right turn lane that's proposed at eastbound Lionville Station. It's, the topography there is could be a little tricky, and that right turn to southbound 113 is pretty ugly, and trucks, and so that clearly, I know this is clearly very preliminary and all that, but I don't know if just curious if you looked at any truck turning templates at this point and the feasibility of actually widening that.
Yes, we have, Matt. Thanks for the question. And as we move through the process, we're happy to share those concepts with you. But essentially, what you follow towards the Turnpike, we'd be looking to skew it, what I'll call plan north, away from the existing office building that resides right next to the Turnpike. In doing so, then we're able to widen on that, call it north side or east side of Lionville Station Road, maintain the access into that office building, and provide the lanes. It's not so much a capacity issue there as it is a queuing issue that we're seeing. There's, 113 has a good number of lanes on it, so there's a good amount of capacity, but it really was the queuing that we were identifying at that location. So providing that lane reduces that queue, then you don't have the backup for people waiting to get into the office building via a left turn that exists right next to the Turnpike. But at that location, we certainly would look to improve the alignment of Lionville Station Road, straighten it out as much as we possibly can within the area that we have to work with, and then provide that lane on that north. The widening would be on the north side or east side.
Okay, thank you. At Route 100 on southbound 113, I believe the study shows that right turn is, definitely getting worse. I think the study just recommends timing changes there. I don't know if the timing changes, maybe you can dig into the study there and confirm, but it seemed like perhaps some physical improvements there might be needed.
I recognize where you're speaking about on 113. It's essentially the missing link there in terms of lanes. There's no right turn on that 113 approach to Route 100.
Yeah.
We have to look and investigate the available right-of-way. There's a berm that occurs right there and a parking lot that sits above grade. But we can certainly look at what can be feasibly done there.
Understood. So the intersection of 113 at 401, it's not in Uwchlan Township, but the traffic backs up into Uwchlan Township from there. I'm just curious if you had any analysis or looked at that northbound 113 movement and how this development would be affecting that.
That wasn't included in our study, Matt, but for the benefit of the audience here, I'll explain that. Typically, as we move through the process here, we would engage PennDOT, who essentially controls 401 and 113. We would evaluate it for them, and Matt would have the opportunity to review that. As he noted, it's not in the township, but there's a whole scoping process we have to go through with PennDOT. At some point in the process, we would do that. Typically, we do that after a conditional use. We would engage them, but we could engage them early in this process if we have a plan and some feedback on what plan to move forward.
Have you guys had any discussions, even internally, about potentially closing Lionville Station Road at like the border with Upper Uwchlan? And again, this is just thinking out loud, just talking big picture concepts. I don't know how the community, whether Uwchlan or Upper Uwchlan, would react to that, but the idea of closing that intersection, because obviously up at, I forget if you mentioned this in the study specifically, but at Lionville Station and Byers, it's pretty ugly, and clearly trucks can't go through there, and even adding traffic to that intersection could be a problem. And as mentioned, the Haywood Drive connection could maybe alleviate that situation.
Yeah, Matt, the Byers intersection was interesting with Lionville Station Road because we were kind of walking the line between, do we want to entice people to travel that direction? The neighbors might not enjoy that. There's the house that lands right in the middle of that odd right turn lane coming eastbound on Byers. So I think we're open to any and all discussions as it relates to the north end there, and if we can come to some agreement there, closing it or doing something else, we're certainly open.
We also have inquired with the owner of the house that's at the triangle there to see if that could potentially be sold and then relocated. So we haven't acquired that property, but we have inquired.
Okay. Does the plan, I don't believe I recall seeing anything about widening Lionville Station Road itself. Is that, it's pretty narrow now. I think it would certainly with, the proposed use and adding traffic to it with truck traffic going from its current cartway width of like maybe 18 feet-ish to, it would have to be much wider. So
yeah,
that would be a comment.
Yeah, Matt, I assume that we would, have to follow what the township direction is and the regulations in the subdivision with regards to that roadway. I think that it's contemplated that the alignment would stay somewhat close to the existing, but certainly some widening or softening could occur.
It's our expectation that we would be rebuilding that road in roughly the same location it is now.
Okay. And then associated drainage would be part of that as well?
Correct.
I assume, yeah. Let's see.
Hey, Matt, I'm going to just jump into a traffic question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. This is Dan Daly, E.B. Walsh & Associates. We're the township engineer. While Matt's kind of flipping through his notes, just want to ask about with the traffic, pedestrian traffic along that area. Obviously, with the warehouse use, the industrial use, it may not necessarily necessitate throughout all of Lionville Station Road, but from the Natatorium down to, they say, the shopping center, has that been discussed or contemplated about at least providing some pedestrian access in that area?
So as our discussions have gone on, that's an example of something that we've done to improve the plans in subsequent iterations. So when we show the residential plan, we will show that we are envisioning a 6-foot wide paved sidewalk from the top of Lionville Station Road all the way down to the end, and then making a connection into the adjacent shopping center. That we feel like that 6-foot wide enables somebody with, you could have a stroller go in one direction and a double stroller go in the other direction, or somebody on a bike, and would really be able to navigate it pretty well. And from that, you'd be able to connect over to the natatorium and ultimately into the passive recreation trails.
Okay, thank you.
That's only on your residential plan, not on this plan?
Correct. That was something that came up from discussions after our submission here. So as we've evolved the plans, we've implemented that.
I'm sorry, Greg. That 6-foot wide path that you just mentioned, would that be incorporated onto this industrial parcel also?
For sure.
Okay.
A couple more questions. Eric, the land use code of 150 for the warehousing. Obviously, as things move forward, it would we'd like to see more detailed. If you know better what is going to go in each building, whether those land use codes are going to change or not.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's always the question that comes up, and especially with these spec developments, and we've handled it different ways. Certainly, we've gone through it in this township with regard to pre-occupancy evaluations to make sure that we're under the thresholds that were identified with the improvements. At this point, I don't know of any end users that have been identified. What I have found interesting about the warehouses that I've worked on is essentially your higher generator warehouses are ones that have a much higher level of employee count there, which the parking really dictates what kind of end user you could land with the amount of parking for their employees. So I would assume that if there was a high traffic generator that came on board, they would require more parking. We'd be coming back through land development anyway at that point and evaluate that land use at that time.
And just a point for public record, I guess, also in the comp plan, the 2020 comp plan, anything related to looking at when this property was to be developed, there was a desire for a ramp directly from the Turnpike, possibly into that location, as well as potentially a bridge to connect over the Turnpike to Gordon Drive that would give better access to that property. So that's something that we certainly would love to see looked at.
We haven't looked at a bridge or the off-ramp. In the operators that we've spoken with for that piece that's on the other side of the preserved area, building number 7, we had a lot of interest in groups that wanted to actually keep that private, so pharmaceuticals, defense contractors, that would really prefer to have a gate there and kind of control who's coming on or off their property.
Thanks.
Staying with the theme of traffic, we talked a little bit about, from Matt's question, obviously, you believe the majority of traffic coming from this down 113 will be heading up 100 to get to the Turnpike. And the intersection of 100 and 113 is problematic, and it's difficult to turn right, and there's a lot of challenges there. What's the feasibility of directing large vehicle traffic onto Sherry Boulevard to bypass that intersection of 100 and 113?
I mean, that's a definite possibility. We could look at signage that says to Turnpike at that location. As I'm sure everyone's aware, that intersection at 100 was just radically improved there for the development there, but it certainly has a lot of excess capacity, more so than I would say 100 and 113 currently has at the time, at this time. So that's certainly something that we could evaluate for directional signage to be placed there. And you could even look at the similar flow from the Turnpike or 100 north, from the north on 100, coming through, utilizing the jug handle, utilizing Cherie Boulevard, and the additional lanes that were just implemented at the eastern end of Cherie at 113 to make that left onto 113 towards Phoenixville.
Do you have a understanding of the percentage of where these trucks would be going, Turnpike, 100, Route 30?
Yeah, yes, I do. Again, these are estimates based on our historical information in the area, the work we've done, and the traffic volumes that occur today. So essentially, we would anticipate that upwards of 80% of the trucks would be destined for the Turnpike. And again, without an end user in mind, it's an estimate at this point that's been vetted for other warehouse uses in the area. The others then would be destined towards certainly north and south on Route 100, and certainly out onto 113 down to Route 30.
Yeah, the concern is Route 30 because there's such many chokeholds there and 4 schools on the way with school traffic. And so I was just wondering what that percentage would be for Route 30.
Route 30, we identified 5% traveling down to that location. Again, these are, the warehouses as they're laid out with regards to this, dependent upon the end user, but these are more of regional distribution type centers that would, typically go up and down the Turnpike and find 76 and more major routes.
So with the traffic here, sorry guys, I guess I haven't really looked at the traffic report here, but I know in the fiscal impact study there was a projected full-time equivalent workers there of 1,408. Is that consistent from the fiscal impact study with what was looked at from a traffic point of view?
I'm sorry, Dan, I missed the question there with regards.
Sure. The fiscal impact study had done a 1,400 projected full-time workers. Is that consistent with the traffic studies that you would think with supporting this number of industrial buildings?
I don't have the specific calculation, but the 1,400 sounds reasonable because it would typically be shift type work. And when I'm looking at the peak hour generation of 250 trips or so, split out over the course of say 3 shifts, I would say that's pretty reasonable. That's something we can double check with Matt's office and determine if that's appropriate, but it sounds reasonable in terms of number of employees.
Okay.
Another topic to move on to, since we've covered traffic pretty good, how about stormwater? What's your...
Yeah, we looked at the area available to manage stormwater after the conditional use plan was built, and there's opportunity to do underground storage underneath the parking, There's also opportunity to do more natural or surface basins. A lot of the vegetated areas could sort of double as stormwater management as well, to disconnect that runoff from the parking and the impervious areas. But we will be required to improve the rate, the volume, and the quality of stormwater runoff from this site, from its existing conditions as an agricultural field. So stormwater will improve with implementation of a stormwater management design.
Hey, Rick, would you do the Planning Commission and the public a favor and just kind of run through the drainage patterns of where this water goes to, and to kind of discuss a little bit of the watershed? I think it'd be helpful for everybody to understand that concept here.
Yeah, there's a stream and wetlands which kind of bisect the property north to south here. So much of the runoff from this site is going down in this direction towards this stream. And then on the western side, this portion of this.
You can do it then, and then do it for us.
Sure.
No public comment at this time.
So runoff from the developed portion of the site goes down to the stream, and the runoff from the west portion of the site also goes down to the stream. The proposed stormwater management would mimic those drainage patterns as not to propose any major difference. So can I point that out to the members of the Planning Commission? Yes. So as I was saying, there's a stream that bisects the property right here through the middle, and a lot of this runoff is draining to that stream. And then on the west side, a lot of this runoff is going to the stream. The stormwater management would capture runoff from these impervious areas, and there would be small or less discharge to those same streams. And we would not propose to change the drainage patterns or push runoff in a different direction than it's going now.
I just say there's a seep or a spring between your two northernmost buildings on the right-hand side. On the eastern side, Plan East, Plan North, between those two buildings, there's a seep that runs all the way down to a stream behind that, right?
Yeah.
No, not there. Your northernmost building, northeasternmost building,
3 and 4.
3 and 4.
right between them, there's a seep
Okay.
existing today. You can see it. That's where he hasn't planted his crop.
Right.
That seep spring feeds that stream going that direction.
Okay, yes, there is some topography, and you're right, there is a sort of valley here. Same thing applies with a stormwater management design to 3 and 4. That runoff would be captured and managed, and it would infiltrate on the site, and that runoff would not be directed to a different location than where it's going today.
Well, you infiltrate it, or you detain it or retain it, and then you release it at the 24-hour rate.
All of the above, yes.
But then that 24-hour rate could be running for days and days and days, where in a normal situation of a normal pervious area, it seeps and it goes.
With an infiltration design, you can infiltrate it into the ground so that runoff doesn't leave the site. It goes into the groundwater.
You're saying it goes to the aquifer.
Yes, sir.
Have you done your pitch yet?
There's been some soils investigations on the site. We have not done a full stormwater investigation, but we've looked at the soils on site, and we believe they do infiltrate.
Okay.
Yeah, there wasn't evidence of bedrock or high groundwater or clays, which would prevent that.
Well, understand there's a karst formation that runs along the Turnpike,
Understood.
right? And there's sinkholes that open up all the time in this area. So infiltrating in that area directly into the aquifer is going to be problematic, in my opinion. You're going to have to drill, you're going to have to see where it is. But your test pits alone are not going to tell you what you need to know.
A geotechnical investigation and on-site observation of the installation of those systems would mitigate that.
I don't see how.
So Bill, what will happen here during the full design of this stormwater system, They are going to have to research the geology within this area to verify if they have karst geology here and determine if there is potential for sinkholes. And there's means and methods through the permitting process that they would have to look to design stormwater systems in order to mitigate that risk for sinkholes. From my 30 years of experience within Uwchlan, we haven't had that type of geology within this region, within Uwchlan, from our review of the maps to show that we have limestone underneath in this area. But during the process, the design process, they'll have to provide documentation to support that.
Okay.
Hey, Rick, with that in mind here, would you walk through the public here, the discussions about the permitting process that you have to go through, both the municipal regulations and the DEP regulations, and talk a little bit about the stream, the watershed that you're located in here, and where this kind of, you talked about where it's leaving the site, but big picture, where this water drains to, which watershed and such would be helpful.
Yeah, the municipal code requires developments of this nature to reduce flows, to reduce volumes, and to improve the quality of stormwater runoff. So the township code requires that of us. In addition to that, through DEP and the County Conservation District, what's called a NIPDES permit is required for this type of development. Anytime you disturb more than an acre, that type of permit is required from DEP. If the stream is of high quality, that changes our approach to stormwater. We'll have to make sure that our runoff is appropriate for this type of stream. If it's trout stocking, if it's currently impaired, we'll have to improve that quality and reduce the amount of sediment that gets to it. And eventually it goes, to the Brandywine and then down to Wilmington is the ultimate watershed for this stream.
I'm sorry, I missed that. It's the Pickering. Which did you state it was? We're in the Pickering watershed, and it is a designated high quality stream designation here for this. So, and it's considered impaired.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Carl Russick from French and Pickering Creeks Conservation Trust.
Yes,
you mentioned the need to improve water quality from stormwater from current land use, which is ag. Have you undertaken any specific monitoring of water quality and existing peak storm flows in the surface water or that headwaters portion of the Pickering?
We have not monitored the runoff at this site currently, but part of our design will require us to model existing conditions using design storms, and our design will improve upon that.
So you're saying you would just use model-derived numbers, not actual data from the existing creek?
The stormwater code, we'll meet the stormwater code of the township and DEP. We do not collect samples at the stream as part of that design.
Okay. You also mentioned as part of the NIPDES, you need to address, if it's HQ trout stocking, it does drain into the Pickering Reservoir, which is a drinking water source, and it is that stretch, that 0.85 mile segment, is currently not attaining for pathogens. So I'm wondering how you'd specifically address that as part of the stormwater plan.
So I'm not sure what the source of pathogens might be on the current use. I don't know if ag generates that, but I know that the proposed design will have filters most likely in most of the inlets to prevent pollution being collected into the stormwater management system and ultimately to the stream.
What about hydrocarbons? Oil, gas, diesel?
There are filters that can be used in inlets on site. So for an industrial use like this, that might be a good solution. There are filters that go inside the inlets. They collect those hydrocarbons. They're easily maintained and replaced on a regular basis. That would be all part of the stormwater operation and maintenance agreement, if that in fact is a concern and part of our permit.
Hey, Dan, real quick, that basin at the Turnpike is...
Could you use your microphone? We're having trouble hearing you.
You hear me now?
Yeah.
The basin that's along the Turnpike that was just put in, is that temporary?
I believe that's a permanent basin.
That's a permanent basin?
I believe so.
Okay. It just kind of appeared.
So if I understood you correctly, you had mentioned that post-development, this site would see less runoff than it currently does in its pre-development state? Did I hear that correctly? What storm event was that based on? 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year?
Well, there'd be significant reductions in the 1 and the 2 year storms, which are the most frequent, but there would also be, in the higher storms, we're required to not increase those. So for, I believe it's the 25, 50, and 100, we would maintain those and not increase them. But inherently, there is safety factors built into the required design, which ultimately would probably reduce those larger storms as well.
And where does it discharge if the capacity is exceeded?
The stormwater management design would have overflows to safely convey that to a location where it wouldn't cause erosion, it wouldn't flood out a road, or it wouldn't flood a building. So we do put safety valves, for lack of a better term, for those large flow storms to overtop and get to the stream safely.
At the conclusion of construction, when it's an operating development, who maintains responsibility for maintenance of the storm drainage?
So a stormwater operation and maintenance agreement will be prepared. It will be recorded with the deed of the property. So whomever owns this property or maintains it, whether there's some HOA or, well, not for this plan, but if there's the owners of the property are forever committed to maintaining these things in perpetuity. It's carried with the deed forever.
This is probably a question back for Greg here. With that said, and one of my questions for the land use discussions is the ownership. So right now, this conditional use plan doesn't show lot lines. You have this as shown here as a single parcel. What would the intent of that be for the ownership? Or would these individual units be sold, these individual buildings be sold? Is there going to be a condo plan associated with that? And is there a master's association here, which ties back into the management here? But
yeah, we had envisioned condoing the property, and then we hadn't gotten that far on whether or not we were going to be selling off units or keeping them ourselves. When we get into the residential plan, our intention there is that we would be a home builder in the community, but we would also likely have another home builder in the community with us, kind of like we did at Ventry, which is the old Edgemont Country Club that we purchased and developed. Where it was us and another home builder. But we controlled it, and we set up the HOA and then handed it off to the homeowners association. In this case, there would be a master declaration set for some type of an association, and then potentially the condos would be owned by different entities within the community.
so then potentially you would have a master's association doing the operation and maintenance of the individual, of all the stormwater facility, would probably what would happen in a scenario like that.
Correct. That's similar to an active community we have right now in Ellis Preserve at the corner of Westchester Pike and 252 in Newtown Township, where there's a master community and then there's pods where there's different condo associations within master community.
And for the planning commission and the public's sake here, that there is set language and legal agreements that are prepared that outlines the operation and maintenance needs for those stormwater facilities. And if they default, the township has the right to go in and maintain those facilities and basically lien the properties to take care of that. That's how that is currently operated as detailed in the township stormwater ordinance.
You mentioned stormwater, like safety valves for intense storm events so that it wouldn't be overflowing into anywhere and it would all be safely handled on site. Do you have any ideas as to specifically where that would be? And is that area, that buffer area that you're talking about safely handling this, is that part of the 100 acres of open space or is that in addition to that?
We looked conceptually at stormwater, and ideally, a lot of these systems are underneath the parking lots, and they would have outfalls, to the nearest water course, whether it be a valley up here, whether it be conveyed to a swale which carries it there, or a culvert underneath Lionville Station Road to this side of the stream. In those larger storms, the overflow structures would allow those large flows to pass into a pipe, through a pipe that's appropriately sized, and to the nearest stream bed. Did that answer your question?
I think so. You're saying mostly underground,
Mostly underground when possible. Yeah. Correct.
So back to the stormwater facilities and the open space. There were some discussions about how much open space you're providing with this facility here. Are you calculating the open space based upon the green areas? Because I know from the conceptual plans you do have a number of subsurface beds shown throughout parking lot areas, but there are a number of circled, bubbled areas for stormwater facilities that are in the green areas, so that those green areas are not going to be open green areas. They're going to potentially be stormwater facilities as part of the open space. Is that what the intention is with that?
Some of our surface basins are shown in the green areas, which we calculated as open space. Trails can meander along the border of those open basins and be effective recreational use. Being inside the basin is probably not a great way to enjoy that open space, but they were part of that green area.
My next question is, how much open space are you leaving us? And is that unbuildable ground that you're leaving? Is there any place that you're leaving anything for parks, recreation, usable, besides the trail and the swimming pool?
So the trail does meander through this stream area here. The other open space that was calculated, are the green areas here in and around the perimeter of the property.
Right, that's just greenage around the buildings.
Yes.
But you're not giving us any nice plot of land for anything, leaving open.
So, good question, good point. As our plans and as our discussions evolved, as you'll see in our residential plans, we do have community open space, dedicated park area, and a bunch of other features that resulted from our community meetings that we've held so far.
Okay, not on this plan.
So right, we submitted this plan and then received a bunch of feedback on it, and that's why we've made a lot of changes and why it's evolved.
Okay.
Can you speak to your thought process and concept of the number of buildings, the locations of the buildings, percentage? Like, what was the thought process in this design? Just to help us understand the orientations of the buildings, the number.
Yep. So the question is, how did we come about this plan? And we've really had to reverse engineer it based upon where the market is right now, and the market for the really large super center industrial plan has changed over the last couple of years. There's less demand for that. So the smaller buildings have much higher demand. Your code is also restrictive in the length and width and height of buildings. So we situated these buildings, the size based on code, and then also the orientation based on grade. There is, along here, and I'll show the public as well, there's a difference in topography, so that was a natural breaking point between those two buildings, and we carried that same thought process throughout. Pointing out to the group, there's a kind of a natural swale through here where these buildings are at different elevations than one another, and that's how that orientation came about.
Do you have any potential tenants?
We have received offers on different pieces within the project, but we're not to the point where we're signing any deals on this, because really, quite frankly, the feedback that we received was overly negative from the community.
And are those mostly distribution?
Excuse me?
Are those mostly distribution?
It's a mix, actually.
Circling back to the open space question for a second, do you have a sense of the 100 acres figure that you've put out? What percentage of that 100 acres is land that is otherwise constrained or unbuildable versus that could be built upon that you've elected to offer as open space?
I don't have that number. I know that the upper right quadrant is actually zoned differently. That's zoned, I think, rural residential, I believe.
It's also quite steep, actually.
Yeah, so we didn't plan on putting industrial buildings on something that wasn't zoned for it. But no, I don't have that calculation for you on this plan.
Another question on the overall plan for this one. Obviously, the site as it exists currently is a mix of field and forest. Do you have a sense of how many acres of existing forest canopy under this plan would need to be cleared to accommodate the plan?
Yeah, there are some forested areas on the site. It's pretty heavily vegetated through that stream valley there. And this portion in the upper northeast is pretty heavily wooded, and then the portion in the upper northwest. We do propose a little bit of tree removal, but it's much less than what the township requires to maintain that wooded area.
Hey, Rick, I'll assist here. Just reading off your plan, you have, according to your chart on the plan here, you have 72.9 acres of existing woodlands, and you are proposing 17.8 acres removal, which is just under 25%, 24.4% removal of the woodlands on site.
Correct.
I'll just throw out a question back on the traffic side, just from a 30,000 foot level. I believe we counted around 10 or 12 proposed new driveways on Lionville Station Road based on this. Just a comment, it'd be great to consolidate some of those, and whether you need a frontage road or whatever it is, to not have as many driveways on Lionville Station Road, just to avoid turning conflicts and friction along Lionville Station Road.
Yep, that we can definitely take a look at that.
Yep. Thanks.
I have a question. Buildings 1 and 2, the east side of them I see on sheet 3, an overall site plan layout that we got as part of the conditional use. 150-foot agricultural buffer between those two buildings and the Milky Way Farm property to the east of there. To the northwest of Building 7, though, there is another lot there, and it looks like the parking lots go right up against that. Is that not also an agricultural property?
Building 7 is up against another property in the PIC zoning district, which is it's currently, as I understand it, being forested.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe the ordinance states is that you need to provide the 150-foot buffer up against a residential or agricultural zoned or use. That parcel that you're referring to, which is at the tail end of the cul-de-sac of Haywood Drive, is located within the same zoning district, and it is currently forested. So it is neither an agricultural use or an agricultural or residential zone property.
So it is not at this time an agricultural use?
It is not. It is currently still forested. The applicant, we did have an applicant discussing, wanted to do some tree removal to turn that to agricultural, but at this point it is currently a forested property in the same zoning district.
Understood.
Going back to another statement earlier, we talked about the parcels. I guess as part of this here, you have to, because there's a provision within the ordinance that you actually have to show a sketch plan to indicate that you can create individual lots for each of these buildings. So one of the sections of the ordinance you're allowed to have multiple uses on a single lot. But you have to show that you can subdivide that and that they're feasible to subdivide. So as part of this, as if this plan progresses forward, you're going to have to indicate some lot lines on there. You don't have to design that to be subdivided, but you have to show that it's feasible to do.
Understood.
Question with respect to visual impact. A lot of references made, obviously, to the constraints exiting the site to the north on Lionville Station Road towards Byers. Given the prominence of this parcel topographically, I'm wondering if you've modeled any of the visual impacts that it would have on the view shed below. Like would the larger warehouse buildings be visible from the north?
We haven't yet done architectural drawings for these buildings.
So on that same topic, the comprehensive plan does list Lionville Station Road as a scenic road one of our comments in one of our drafts here is that the applicant should evaluate methods to preserve the visual character of the corridor. That is something that it is defined in the comprehensive plan about that being a scenic vista for the roadway.
Yeah, as I understand it, for the comprehensive plan, if it's classified as a scenic roadway, we would have to demonstrate that the view sheds would not be impacted. So that would be part of what we'd be required to do here. So we acknowledge.
Yep. I guess on that same topic of the comprehensive plan consistency, so we talked a bunch about the traffic. The comprehensive plan does have a comprehensive plan, and the township official map has that future road connection to Haywood Drive, which you had addressed earlier. That's not an ownership of the applicant here. It does the comprehensive plan discusses the turnpike slip ramp possibilities. integration of pedestrian and bicycle facilities. And then the big item here, which we've touched base about here, is the park and recreation. The township map here, official map, does indicate a parkland located on this property. So, and I know on the residential property here, you have you've looked at that here, but that is something that would need to be looked at, incorporated into this industrial plan also.
Yep, understood.
So you mentioned you don't yet have architectural diagrams for the buildings. Do you have an anticipated building height based upon your customer interest?
Yeah, our expectation was that we would stay within the code building heights, not seek variances or exceed that.
So the building height for that is 35 feet. I believe your conditional use plan says greater than 35 feet. So I don't know if that is your intention. You do have provisions that allow you to exceed the 35 feet if you then have there's a net decrease in a maximum impervious coverages and lot coverages here for the building coverage and lot coverage for the site. But I think you probably need to clarify that, because your current application says you're proposing to exceed the 35 feet. So,
yeah,
I don't know what's typical for the uses that you're thinking here. If you think that these users would be able to accommodate within the 35-foot area, so.
I believe so. With an industrial use like this, 35 feet should be adequate. There may be areas of the building where the loading docks are, where the actual ground to ceiling or ground to roof height might exceed that. But as we measure the building height, it's an average grade around the entire building. So while the front half of the building may only be 15 feet high and the back half is 35 to 40, the average would be less than 35.
Which I don't think that math you just added up is correct. 50 and 35, but yeah, but we understand. So you'll do a building height calculation during the design process to show compliance with the maximum height of 35 feet. And if you exceed that, which you are permitted to do, you just have to decrease your impervious coverage accordingly. So
understood. Yes.
One of the conversations that may begin in earnest as you go through this process is the degree to which you're prepared to consider the township buying down certain elements of the development for additional open space. In this plan, have you contemplated for which areas you might be most open to that?
Yeah, we haven't yet planned on that. There have been discussions about that conceptually, but they haven't really evolved past just conceptual discussions.
Hey, Greg, would you mind walking through the fiscal impact analysis here? Just kind of talk a little bit about that.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, I'll jump ahead a couple slides here. Have a couple, one bullet point that kind of summarizes that. We did submit that with the conditional use plan. As far as the industrial use, the contribution, an annual net township impact would be a little over $100,000. And then for the school district, it would be the annual net positive impact would be around $2.2 million. So overall, the fiscal impact is positive on the conditional use plan.
And that's maybe for the public's sake here, understanding how that comes about here with the tax revenue here. Just mind running through. I think you're actually maybe that bullet point above your items, above the summary there. If you want to kind of just go through that here real quick, so both the Planning Commission and the public understands that. you really, what you've kind of outlined in that, how is that generated here? I think you just could probably read that bullet point above the summary there.
Yeah, okay. So economic and fiscal impact studies. Rateable is currently, Downingtown School District is not paying taxes. The community will significantly contribute to the local tax revenue through property taxes, which can support public services such as schools, roads, and emergency services. And then what we did was just highlighted sort of the net bottom line impact. We haven't gotten into the residential plan yet, so I don't know if we want to wait till we go through that. So I just wanted to kind of talk about that.
Yeah, you can wait until we get to the residential plan to talk about that. But it's basically your property taxes and it's your tax revenue from the EIT taxes for the people working there. It incorporates that into that net profit area.
Yes.
Was that impact we just saw, was that for residential or for the commercial?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Was that for the residential or the commercial?
That was for the commercial.
Commercial? Okay. Go ahead, ask a question.
Can we move on to another?
Yeah, go ahead.
I saw the bog study line item, the turtle study. What were the results?
We had the property was studied for bog turtles, and there were found to be no bog turtles on the property. And we'll share that report with DEP as well as the township.
And when was that study?
It's conducted over I don't know, there was a prior study done before we had the property under agreement, so we hired the same company to come back and update it. So I believe they spent a total of 36 days and evenings studying the habitat, potential habitat, and that was done relatively recently, but I don't know when the first study was done. Both studies found it inconclusive, conclusive that there was not a habitat currently for bog turtles.
We'll get a copy of that with the locations that were studied.
Certainly. The question was, could we provide a copy of the bog turtle study, which we will.
Are you planning to bring natural gas down Lionville Station Road?
Yes, sir.
113?
I know just checking I know checking in with our consultants, we don't have any other questions on the industrial plan here. I don't know if the Planning Commission has any final questions or if we want to take like a 5-minute bio break and then come back and talk about the residential plan.
Okay.
Sounds good. We're on a 5-minute intermission. Okay, so we're going to show a few of the iterations and some of the stuff that we talked about where the plan has evolved, we feel like in a positive manner as a result of the interactions that we've had with, I'll call them stakeholders. So it's neighbors, it's adjacent neighbors, it's township, and some other folks in and around the region that had some ideas. This first plan that we have up here, I'm just going to kind of hit on, Andrew can probably with a point as well for efficiency. But this was a plan of around 750 homes that when we put the property under agreement with the school district, this was kind of the initial sketch that we had done. This very quickly, to the benefit of your township staff, got beat down and shrunk up considerably. This plan initially was a 55 plus community, and that's one of the things in our discussions with the township. We have in our agreement with the school district that if it becomes housing, it would be 55 plus, so age restricted. We understand that that is not currently in the ordinance that's in front of you, the age restriction, but it is something that contractually we've agreed to with the seller, so we would abide by in our current plan. So this plan, as I mentioned, quickly got changed. You want to flip to the next one? All right, so now this plan starts to show some things that were responsive. We have in the bottom left, we have the natatorium placed on there. And then we also have the beginnings of a nature trail that kind of goes around here. When we were first presenting this to the township and neighbors, there was a lot of feedback, specifically, how would the public access open space? So as our plan evolves, we address that. The question about connectivity, the question about setbacks against agricultural, the question about the sidewalks, and then we started to get some really interesting feedback when we first, one of the first group that we met with was Milky Way Farms, and we wouldn't have had any idea to know that having a dog park next to their cow pasture was a bad idea. We just didn't think about it. So they pointed out, hey, those animals aren't going to live in harmony. So from this plan, we relocated the dog park completely. As we started meeting with more of the neighbors, some of the environmental things started to come up where the folks to the north mentioned, hey, is there any way that you can integrate bird boxes through here? We happen to be in the migratory path of the monarch. Is there any way we could do essentially a way station on the property? Things that we hadn't considered, but were like, absolutely. And the more research we've done, this is directly in the migratory path of the monarch. And there's not a lot that has to be done for us to accommodate that. So as we'll show you on the plan where we have such a, essentially a pit stop for the monarchs. If you keep going. All right, so this plan this plan is the one that's before you now. And I'd like to just highlight some different things. In the upper left-hand corner, we have potentially a connection to Haywood, either through Hankins' property or through Eli Kahn's property. To the right of Eli Kahn's property, there's a kind of a stub road there. So there could potentially, again, we don't own those properties, but there are areas that in the future, if there were future development, there could be a connectivity. In this rendering, we have the aquatic center, and then we now have a public park, and that was as a result of conversations with the township and with some of the neighbors. One of the things that was important in our discussions with the township was that the public park wouldn't burden the residents of the township financially. So we agreed that we would work into the Community Homeowners Association and Maintenance Corporation for the community, that they would maintain and pay for upkeep of the park. but we would still have accessibility. So there's a trailhead here next to the aquatic center that people could park to use the park, to use the trails. And then the upper right-hand corner that we were talking about earlier, where there's some steep slopes and kind of a heavily wooded area in that rural residential zoning. At the end of each of these cul-de-sacs, we also put parking spots. So if somebody just wanted to park there and use the open space that wasn't necessarily a resident of the community, they could do that. One of the other things that came up in our discussions with the township and then the neighbors was the two historic buildings. So there's one on the upper side there that we have integrated into this community, and we envision it to be, we would fix the outside and fully renovate it. One of the things our company has is we do have a custom renovation business that does historic renovations. We would have that company do that renovation, and then we would have that be part of the community. We were thinking of it maybe like a community mail center or something like that, so the post office could just come to one spot, and people would be able to collect their mail there. The other one on the bottom right-hand side, we have entered discussions with Tim Ferriss and for his potentially a store where he could sell his bee pollen. We were his honey, but also that he could make the honey in this building. And then we have in there a little connection to this 6-foot sidewalk that we talked about that would connect ultimately down to 113. But folks could park next to that building. It would be fully renovated, and then we were going to give that to him for that future production. Another thing that came, an evolution of this plan, I mentioned, you'll see there's a key here where there's the bird nesting boxes, and then we have one here for the monarch way station. That's this area here. Essentially, the monarchs, as they're traveling north, they would eat milkweed, and that would make them poisonous from predators. And then on their way back down south, they would need to different types of nectar from different types of plants. So that this area would be part of our open space, but it would be, picture it like more like a wildflower type setup. Down towards the right, based on some feedback that we had with Milky Way Farms next door, we've agreed to take, it was really important to them that this pasture area didn't have, it had a bigger buffer because that's where most of their activities are going. And there was really good dialogue with them about the fact that residential next to agricultural could be an issue from the extent of future residents saying, we don't like the smell, we don't like the noise, we don't like the early mornings. So we agreed, for one, there was townhomes here that were sitting at 150 feet from the boundary line there. We've totally taken them out. So we now have a 300-foot buffer next to the pasture area. We also have a 300-foot buffer along the top. For these single homes backing up, we have shrunk the backyards so that we would have about 190 feet from property line to back a house here. And then we've also agreed to build a berm up. I don't know if you have a rendering of the, okay. If you recall, most of these homes will be first floor master or first floor owner's bedrooms because of the active adult nature of them. So when somebody's standing at their living space, they'd be looking into a berm, not necessarily up and over into a farm. We've also agreed to try to keep the pests from leaving our property and going over to the farm, to build a 10-foot high deer fence and run that the length of our adjacency with the farm. In talking to the township, one of the things that was important is there would be some component of the residential that would be affordable in nature. We happen to be in the most expensive county in the state, so affordability is different in different areas. And we wanted, and the township wanted, a place where current Uwchlan residents could ultimately live in an affordable nature. So in the bottom right-hand corner here, adjacent to the commercial area is where we have slotted for affordable, affordable rental properties like apartments. Andrew, anything else to touch on? Open to questions from that.
Could you address the total number of units of each type, affordable housing, single family?
Yeah, so we have slotted on here 66 of the affordable apartments. This has a total of 580 units, mixed 4 different product types, larger lot singles, smaller lot singles, and then 2 different types of villas, which would be like attached carriage homes. When I say larger than the smaller lots, but not large lot singles like you'd see throughout the rest of the township.
How many apartments?
66, and we were shooting to have 10%.
60?
66.
I had a question a few questions about the affordable housing. My first reaction to it is I see it appears to be segregated down in the corner away from everybody else. That doesn't necessarily follow best practices in terms of, combining the community and mixing them together for equity and my first reaction to the plan where I see the affordable apartments located down in the southeast corner, they appear to be segregated away. They're not intermixed and distributed through the rest of the plan, which doesn't, to me, really strike as really what you want to see in terms of equity and inclusion for, mixing the community together. My other question, and I think you brought up, it is an expensive county. The proposed ordinance to rezone this, to allow this, has a little bit of language in here about affordable housing. And that puts this at 80% or below the median income for Chester County, as determined by HUD, Housing and Urban Development. So that's a kind of like minimum level. In the industry, we see affordable housing levels set at 50 or 30%, which is much farther beyond what we'd really kind of expect to see. But the median income in Chester County for a family is $123,000 and $123,041. 80% of that is $98,432. If you then take that and they list 36% as basically a standard for somebody, no family should be able or should be required to spend more than 30% of their income on housing. That's kind of a standard metric used in the industry for affordability, and that's how you back into all the other numbers. Here they have that at 36%, so I am a little curious about the discrepancy there when 30 is kind of an industry standard number. Why are we pushing up to 36? But if we use that and we go back to that, 80% of 123 is $98,432,000, so 80% of median income. Take 30%, 36% of that, $35,435 per year, which is about $2,953 per month, which doesn't sound affordable to me. So kind of interested in your feedback on all that input.
Yeah, sure. We're open to discussing what those numbers and thresholds are. I think that you're going to invite people coming from all over the place, the lower the number is, and it's totally fine to us. So it's kind of a back and forth of exactly, this was introduced The concept of affordable housing was introduced from the township. We proposed some of the different thresholds,
Sure.
but we're happy to keep that dialogue going with what that would look like.
Okay.
Can we talk traffic for a second, please?
Certainly.
570 homes, that's 1,140 cars. Every one of those houses is going to have 2 cars. They're $800,000, these homes, $700,000 price point. Based on what you're paying per lot, I mean, I assume that's the key equation.
Yeah, this. All right, this would be a higher end community for sure from a price standpoint.
All right, so you're going to have 2 cars in every garage. That's 1,140 cars right there.
Yeah, we have our traffic engineer here.
Don't talk about traffic. I just want people to hear the numbers besides the traffic.
Sorry.
So it's 1,140 cars, and if it's 1 car per apartment, you're at 1,200 cars. Regardless of what your traffic study says, 1,200 cars coming and going 1 to 4 times a day. Where are they going to go? It's worse than the tractor trailers at the commercial site. I mean, by far, you're never going to get. I live 3/4 of a mile down that road. I passed 22 cars in 3/4 of a mile coming here tonight, and there's only 11 people on that road. What's it going to be when there's 2,400 people or 3,000 people on that road?
Yeah. And I'm not an expert on the traffic side. You wouldn't mind?
Certainly, and again, this is data based on actual operating residential developments that are 55 and over. The data is compiled based on actual traffic counts, and again, comparing that during what I'll call the rush hour, peak hour, we would be reduced over the previously discussed plan by about 100 trips in an hour. Certainly, you're correct in the number of vehicles that may or may not be on site. On the site. I give this story with regard to when I'm talking about residential traffic. In my house, we have 3 vehicles. It's me, my wife, and my 2 daughters. My wife leaves to teach at 6 a.m. in the morning. I work from home most days. So even in a 4-person household, we're in the morning, we're not adding traffic during that rush hour. In the afternoon, it's, she gets home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Her typical rush hour starts at 4 to 5 p.m. She's not adding traffic at that time. So certainly you'll see that peak hour traffic, but in these 55 and over communities, especially when we're talking about residential, those trips are spread out over the day. So you'll see traffic during the day, which is very similar to what you would experience under that previously discussed plan. But during those rush hours, we're seeing a reduction over the traffic that we would be seen from the previous plan we discussed.
Well, I appreciate that as an anecdotal evidence of you, but the second thing is this mail center or whatever. If you think people that spend $700,000 or $800,000 for a house are not going to drive their car to go get their mail, I mean, I don't see that happening. I don't see people walking to get their mail. That's just going to add more trips on the road. So I think that's almost a non-starter in my opinion. I just don't get it. I don't see how you could possibly think that there is not going to be a line of cars backed up in both directions, day in and day out, hour after hour on that road when you add 2,400 to 3,000 more residents minimum. And at 55 plus, you've got a lot of retired people. They're going to make 2 and 3 trips a day sometimes. They get up, they go get their coffee, they come back. They get a shower, they go to the golf course, come back. They go out for dinner that night, they come back. That's a lot of trips. A lot of trips.
Certainly, I understand your concern, but I'm an engineer and I follow the data. This is the data that's been collected over years of these residential developments operating. And that's what I apply, that's what PennDOT applies, that's what your township traffic engineer applies as well. So that is the data that's been presented, that's been developed over the past 10, 15, 20 years for these types of developments and how they operate from a traffic perspective.
Well,
are those guidelines and industry standards specific to 55 plus communities or
Yes.
just general residential?
Yes.
It's a really good point about the mail center. It's something we hadn't thought about, but no problem for us to have the mail for the left side of the property. I'll show you on this. This could be the mail facility for everybody on this side of Lionville Station Road, and then in the clubhouse here, it could be for that side. That's a good point. You wouldn't want somebody driving here over to here, crossing the street.
They're not going
So,
to.
yeah, it's a good point.
Right.
So we'll take that into our next iteration.
And you really have no place to put the northbound traffic. I mean, it's just, that
Bill?
intersection, you could tear that house down, you could
Bill?
condemn it.
Bill, sorry, could you speak up? We're having trouble hearing you. Could you?
The house down at the intersection down there at the bottom of Lionville Station Road, it doesn't matter if you tear it down, you still cannot go anywhere. You got a stream that comes through that road at a skew angle. It's on one side of the road at one point, it's on the other side of the road at the other point. Therefore, you cannot widen that road. You can't improve that road. So you either got to make it a one-way road, or you've got to, I don't know what you're going to do. I can't get in my driveway now. And you can talk about consolidating driveways. We have four properties on one driveway already. So we have, and it's just no way to get out. I don't see it. Sorry. Thanks.
I think basically, my opinion, I go along with Bill, is that we got to come up with another solution than just one way out. If it's commercial or residential or whatever, besides Lionville Station Road, we need another way to access this property. And I know you're talking about there's options open, but I think that needs to be a very positive thing that's discussed or taken care of before we go too far anywhere.
Is there anything available to the public related to this community? Because it says there's a park labeled public park. Is there anything related, is there anything available for public use, or is it just for community use?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, that's totally for public, yeah. Any of the open space areas. So where we have the kind of cul-de-sac, at the end of each cul-de-sac, we have parking so that people could access the trail points at different spots. Down at the aquatic center, there's parking there so that folks could utilize the park here. And then up in the upper right, kind of same thing for that open space.
Is the aquatic center open for public use, or is that for only community?
The aquatic center will have no relationship with the community.
Okay, so that changed from the industrial plan to this plan, because it was supposed to be open for public use, correct? In the first plan.
Yeah, I thought your question was, is the aquatic center part of the community use only? So in either plan, the aquatic center is going to be run by Phil Aquatics in the manner that we discussed earlier, where it is open to the public. It'll be open for the school district as well. But residents here may utilize it just the same as any other resident in the township or the area.
Hey, Greg, can you talk about the natatorium and what consists of inside the building, what it's going to be, and maybe that's something that
yeah, that'd be great. Jeff, would you mind touching on that? Again, Jeff is the president of Phil Aquatics, who we have reached a contractual agreement with, where we would donate the property to them, and then they would construct it. And you have an idea what would be inside the building.
The first thing I can suggest is to go to philaquatics.org. It'll tell you most of the information about what we plan and will be doing in the years to come. And it starts out with the concept that it's community-based. It's not just for this site, it's for the entire Downingtown area. Probably the surrounding region will utilize it. Certainly the people in the 55-plus community will utilize it. Conceptually, it's a health and wellness and aquatic center. It's not just swimming pools. There will be public community spaces, there will be public areas in which, and there will be a fee for membership, all to be determined. As we go through the process of what we plan to do, it will include at least 5 different pools within the building, and it will include a basketball court, it will include a suspended track, it will include a full physical therapy complex, it will include different areas for public or private meetings, and for the community to utilize on a membership basis. There will be a monthly fee similar to what you'd paid if you went to Lifetime or other places within the region. We have not finalized with floor plans and conceptual plans. We have some things that we've looked at. We've traveled throughout the country over the last 18 months, visiting 14 different centers from California to Florida to Indiana, the Carolinas, to make sure that we understood what we wanted to accomplish and what we wanted to deliver to this community. It will also provide extensive resources for the special needs community, from people that have autism to people that need to go in and have rehab for a knee replacement, a shoulder replacement. All those kinds of things will be a part of it. We intend to have a public-private partnership, hopefully with a community member that, like a hospital, where this will allow the community to utilize it for those services as well. Yep.
I have more questions about the aquatic center, actually. You said 5 pools. I assume there's a large indoor pool inside that's kind of like the main.
Correct.
Okay. What size pool?
66 meters, 2 bulkheads, 9 lanes.
Okay.
There will be seating for 1,500 people. There will be the ability to have as many as 400.
Hey guys, I'm sorry. Can you use the microphone? We're live streaming. I think that we turned that on. It should work.
I don't think it's on. Can you hear that?
No.
That's the other way.
The main pool itself will be 66 meters long, and it will have 9 lanes, 2 bulkheads of 6 feet between them. It will be able to accommodate 50-meter long course swimming events. The width of the pool the other way is 25 yards. It'll have 25 25-yard lanes. When you consider what's over at Lionville YMCA at the moment, take that times 4.
So you can configure the bulkheads to have 2 short course 25 yards facilities.
We can run 2, yes. And the notion is that if there is an event going on there, now our desired outcome, and it will occur that way, is that event could be going on for an age group swim meet or a high school swim meet. The rest of the facility will still be available to the membership, so that you don't ever shut it down on the community. The community gets to use it at all times, all the other facilities except that which are where there's an event going on at that time.
So school district children could be commingled with outsiders coming in to use other parts of the facility?
Yes.
That's against state law.
No, it's not.
You have
we have the means with which to monitor all of that.
You're gonna have background checks and everything for every person that walks in there.
The school system, when their school children are in there, that will be people who will all have had background checks. That's correct. Okay. When there's another event going on within the facility, those people will not, if there's other kids coming to utilize the facility at that point, it will not endanger them. They will be under supervision of people that are certified.
And according to that's their traffic study?
From the, yes.
20
traffic study that was submitted as part of the preliminary use for the overall by right plan.
Pool generates an additional 2,700 trips a day. It's your doc. I guess it's your document.
Yeah, we evaluate.
Average weekday daily trips, 2,704.
Correct.
Plus events that are going to be able to have 1,500 people, sitting for 1,500 people?
Yes.
Okay.
That's probably 4 or 5 years out.
Microphone, please.
Before those kind of events will occur there, will probably be a good 4 to 5 years out, because in order to run USA swimming meets, you need to qualify for them and the ability to be able to have them before you can start running them. You can run high school meets there, we can run district meets there, we probably can run Pennsylvania State Championships there, but anything larger than that, you need to qualify as an organization to be able to have those other events of larger size.
And I appreciate your enthusiasm for the swimming and all of that, but it doesn't help us. It just creates more traffic, more conflict.
The community will have benefits that far exceed, and the programs that will be run there that will service the community will far
As I
exceed.
said, I appreciate your enthusiasm for swimming.
With that, how about parking for that many vehicles?
So we have, Rick, do you want to touch base on parking?
The conditional use plan had 432 spaces for the natatorium. That was based on square footage of the facility.
How many was that again?
132, sir.
Okay, but he said it can seat 1,500 people.
I learned that this evening.
Just trying to, I know some of them will be bussed in and stuff like that. Then on the same thing for the school team, are they going to be bringing buses in and stuff? And do you have adequate parking for buses?
Yeah, we'll take a look at parking demand based on use.
What are the hours of operation for the facility, typically?
The question was typical hours of operation.
The program will operate, and if Downingtown school system, like other institutions, they can be there working out at 6 a.m. in the morning. So the facility will be open, and it will be open to the membership to come in to do all kinds of other activities, as well as the various programs that will be run there. And it will probably close in the evening. My expectation would be probably around 10 p.m. We anticipate approximately, based on the information and the things we're putting together, that during a normal, typical day, there would never be more than 200 cars in the parking lot at any given point in time.
And we can work with the township on hours of operation. I think the early morning is helpful for folks that want to exercise before work and that type of stuff, and limited lanes for some of the schools. But the evening we can work with that with the township on.
So, couple questions from the traffic side. I guess there was some information provided to the township, or whether it's on the website or somewhere, about a number of 500,000 visitors per year. And then obviously, you're just finding out about the number of, visitors for an event and all that. So, and Eric, I think he was the health and wellness, I think was the land use, right?
Yes.
And this certainly seems to be potentially unique, maybe some special land use studies or, natatorium studies might have to be done, or, I don't know if the one at Westchester University down there is going to equate to how this works at all, for something to look at. But it sounds like the numbers are potentially a lot higher than, maybe certainly than what we saw in the, I know there's no traffic study done now for this residential, but it sounds like the numbers might be a lot higher than maybe what was in your first study.
Matt, until last year, I didn't even know what a natatorium was. So, yeah, we use the health and fitness, that data I discussed earlier, to generate traffic. But I think as we learn more of the operations, we can look at that. I assume if we're talking about those large events that you need to qualify for, there may need to be some sort of event plan that's put in place. Similar to a golf course. If they land a large tournament, they have to have an event plan in place. So I imagine that would be the case here.
Yeah, in all fairness, the number of visitors clearly is going to be spread out. Any land use, you're talking about the 1,140 vehicles with 570 homes, and the fraction of that that's actually in the peak hour when it's really bad is going to be 10% or less, especially even less for 55 and over. So really, it seems like to get the true answers, the traffic study really needs to be done and evaluate this situation.
Agreed. And we'll work with you and PennDOT to determine how we generate the trips for that natatorium, and some local data would probably be beneficial in developing that.
I mean, if the natatorium's open 6 to 10, that's a big, a big swath of the day that all those trips are going to be happening. But for a large event, that needs to be planned for. Parking, how's that going to work, et cetera.
I do agree. We would need to look at the methodology for that because it is an atypical use, but there's probably a lot of information available from other similar facilities in the area. There's not a lot of them, but they're around.
Yeah, and those unique instances where we do traffic counts and collect real-time data, local, that's similar in style and use to this, and develop it in that way.
Could I ask, maybe this might be a question for Rick, the on-street parking, this ties into, I guess, the natatorium, but the community itself, how is this going to be managed for parking for the residential units, and is there potential for overflow parking on streets within the surrounding community, and what the intention is for road widths and on-street parking?
That's a good question. So each of the houses will have 4 off-street parking spots per unit. There's going to be a total of 94 proposed apartment spaces, 390 to 400 proposed for the natatorium, and 434 proposed visitor spaces throughout the community.
So that reserved spaces are parking lots and off-street parking spaces?
Correct.
Not including the on-street parking spaces?
Could you just repeat that last question?
Does that not include the on-street parking places? On street, like what are you doing for your road widths for your community? Is really what I'm asking.
Currently, the roads are designed for two-way traffic, and if the need for more street parking is available, we can consider making those one-way with parallel parking on the side, if we decide we need additional parking.
So you're not providing any on-street parking currently as designed with your roadway widths. So what are they, 24-foot cartways or?
They're 24 currently.
Yeah, which doesn't permit for on-street parking for two-way traffic.
Do you want to touch base on the number of proposed spots here?
So 4 off-street spaces per unit, 580 units, and then that gets us to 434 total proposed visitor spaces.
That's not including the parking lot for the aquatic center. So as we've on the plan here, Andrew, if you can point it out, I'll try to point it out.
There are some pull-in spaces here in addition to the cartway width. So they're head-in spaces right off the street. And they're kind of sprinkled in throughout the plan. They're not traditional parallel spots. There's some here.
Well, I'd say the traffic and parking does need to be studied real carefully.
Yes.
Any other comments? Can we move on to stormwater?
Certainly.
Yep. Similarly, we looked at available areas for stormwater management. There are green spaces here. There's some surface basins kind of spread out throughout the site. The stormwater approach is the same. Capture runoff from new impervious areas, get that into a stormwater management feature, and get that water underground to reduce the volume, the rate of runoff, and to improve stormwater quality. There's also opportunity under some of the parking areas for the natatorium, underneath some of the visitor parking areas, And so we think, we'll take a look at soils and make sure we're siting these things appropriately so that the soils there can absorb the stormwater going in. But the idea is to collect that stormwater, get it underground or get it to a surface basin, and let nature do its thing so that we can mimic what this site was, before it was developed.
Question on the stormwater, and I recognize that there are multiple versions, multiple iterations, so my numbers may not match up exactly with what's on the screen, but I see you've got, because by nature of the different development, it's going to be more surface, so you've got 7.5 acres, give or take, of surface impoundment.
I'm sorry?
You've got 7.5 acres, give or take, of surface impoundment.
Yes.
I'm assuming that's going to be largely mowed turf grass.
The 7.5 acres of stormwater management areas?
Yeah, those impoundments.
It doesn't have to be turf grass. It could be plantings. There's plants and shrubs that can go inside these surface basins, which provide additional stormwater management. As I said, nature is probably our best asset when it comes to stormwater management, so we use some of those plants that do a lot of the work, that evapotranspiration for us.
A couple of the features, and obviously the terrain is going to dictate where you can put things practically, I recognize that, but a couple of the features, particularly the two on either side of the Monarch Station, look like they're in areas that are currently forested. Have you done an analysis of how much forest cover you're trading for stormwater feature?
This is a conceptual analysis, and we will certainly limit the amount of trees we have to cut down to manage our stormwater with a final plan.
And I just want to confirm the 7.5 acres of stormwater features is not included in your 100-acre total of open space in this plan?
Correct. That doesn't include the wetlands and the riparian buffer that will be kind of bisecting the site from north to south. Yeah. That's not a designed stormwater management feature, but it does have inherent value.
For the other plan, we talked about the design storms and the amount of runoff under different circumstances. Can you talk about the same elements for this plan?
Yeah, the same design requirements would apply to this plan. Whether it's residential or a commercial site, the Stormwater Management Code still requires us to reduce those 1- and 2-year storms to much less than what they are today. And then for the higher storms, the 25-year storm, the 50-year storm, the 100-year storm, we'd have to maintain those same flows and not make them any worse.
Speaking generally, to what extent in your practice, and just in general and as it applies to this project, to what extent are you incorporating forward-looking projections for additional stormwater flows due to climate change?
So the state regulations are changing all the time, and as those regulations change, we'll have to keep up with them. So that's when we look ahead, the state does a good job of updating its stormwater management code. The township adopts that, and so as the code change and the requirements change, we'll look for new technologies to get the same or better results.
To clarify on that point, if I might, are you suggesting that you would retrofit the stormwater features once they're completed as the regulations change, or are you saying that you're committed to matching current code at the time of construction?
At the time they're installed is when we'll use the current regs. If stormwater management were to become inundated with sediment and if there's a plan to replace a system, we would look at ways to upgrade it.
But we're building to code, not above code. You're building to code, not above code, in anticipation of future capacity issues.
We'll build to code.
Right.
So this plan, the residential plan, calls for 32% impervious, which is 74.6 acres of the site. I went back and I was looking at the industrial plan. I couldn't find the tabulation. I'm sure you have it. Do you know what the impervious was for the industrial plan versus the residential plan?
Not off the top of my head. I think it might be a little less than this one, but
Okay.
I'll have to check my numbers. Thank you.
Yeah, and then along those lines, not related necessarily to stormwater management, but for the woodlands, I think we said in the last session that there was roughly 25% removal of woodlands on the industrial plan. Do you know what the percentage is roughly for the residential?
We haven't calculated that number yet, but we would have to be less than, what the township allows.
Okay.
I think just from my notes, I think for the industrial plan, the total impervious was 88.9 acres
Okay, thank you.
versus 74.6 for.
So the residential plan has less impervious.
But the 88.9 acres was the industrial use, not including the natatorium here. So I guess, well, the natatorium would stay the same as is, but yeah, so.
Do you have have you done a critical path or some roughed out a critical path from start of construction, from, once permits are obtained and you've got your NIPDs and your building permits, do you have a critical path timeline that you're trying to get to?
We don't have a time that we're trying to achieve, but this project would take about 3.5 years to build out, roughly. I would say that our Ventry community was about a year less than that, the one that on the old Edgemont Country Club. So we think that this is about a year more than that.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't even calculated in all the number of trips for building materials and stuff like that as this thing gets rolling too. I mean, that's a whole different animal. The wear and tear on the roads, that road is on dirt. It's a dirt road for all intents and purposes.
The road will be rebuilt in either of our two plans. For the residential plan, in fairness to Rick and Chester Valley engineers, they did not fully engineer that plan. This is a sketch rendering that we had two different planners work on, and then we overlapped it with Rick's work where we took account for steep slopes and that kind of stuff. Reviewed it a couple of times, but this it's not fully engineered because we didn't know if this was something the township wanted us to head in this direction.
Back to stormwater. You mentioned that if we went commercial, the owners of the buildings or whoever had that property would maintain the stormwater. Who would maintain this stormwater? Is it township, or would you have the homeowners association handle it? Because that's just another burden on the township.
We definitely do not intend to burden the township with that, so the homeowners association would be responsible for that. Typically, when a critical mass of residents move into the homeowners association, we dedicate the property to the homeowners association, and then they're in charge of all of those types of agreements, stormwater management, and the like, road maintenance, that kind of stuff.
Your concept of the bird boxes in Monarch, it's beautiful, but is it for both plans or just this one?
So the Monarch Way Station, the question is would that be in both plans? And it would be in both plans. This is another example of when we submitted that industrial plan in February, we hadn't had the benefit of meeting all the neighbors, but we would incorporate that in either.
Yeah, because that would help with consistency of comparison.
I had another open space question, and I recognize that the conversations have been very preliminary and very conceptual, but is it fair to say that, with respect to potential buy down of units, that the residential plan would be more malleable than the industrial plan because that's larger blocks?
That's if the township decided to purchase down some of the density. I think that's a discussion that we could have in either plan, depending on where the critical areas that the township deems. But we're open to that discussion. We have a fixed number with our seller that's been court approved with the seller, so it's hard for us to go back and say, hey, just kidding, we can't pay you that. So we would want to maintain the agreement that we have with them.
I'm sorry, one more question on the, and I recognize that there's a lot of financial calculus that goes into how many units, how large, that enable you for this to pencil out, but would you be willing to consider higher density on the residential side in order to have a lower impact footprint?
So as we were meeting with the neighbors, one of the things that came up was, let's shoot to preserve 100 acres of open space. And that's what we strived for in our design. Another component to the design is to have multiple different product types. In this case, we have 5, so that those could be absorbed at the same time as one another. To get back to the point here, so that this isn't a 15-year build out of the same repetitive product. It's important to us that the streetscapes look different than one another, and the product differentiation is helpful to that end.
Anything else for that? Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the environment with the houses compared to the warehouses. I mean, how we never even got into any topics of like light pollution or anything like that. Just kind of putting that out there is what kind of impact the home's going to have and the aquatic center. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how, things here. That's all.
Understood. I think that the interactions that we've had with the neighbors and other stakeholders have helped us develop a more environmentally friendly plan. A bunch of the things that we talked about, that this low impact trail, we wanted people from the community to be able to walk throughout the neighborhood. The low impact trail is just these chips so that we're not putting pervious things, near a stream bed, for instance. I think the connectivity, this is somewhat on an island. We've talked about before that we can't connect necessarily to the Struble Trail from here, but what we can do is what we can control on the property that we have here, so that we think that 6-foot sidewalk and then connecting to the Limoncello parking lot, and then also getting down to 113 helps enable some of the circulation a little bit. Bigger buffers in certain areas. We would like to leave the upper right section. We would love to have trails in there, but we didn't want to go start paving trails since it's heavily wooded back there, but we want people to have access to be able to walk back through the woods. But the migration station and the nesting boxes and that type of stuff we thought were all good gestures that came from our meetings with people.
With that section back there that you're not going to do anything with, that backs up to residential and the farm and woods and steep slope. So if people just start wandering out there, are you going to fence it in? Or
yeah, we're fenced in along the property boundary with Milky Way, and that was part of the discussions that we had with them. We don't currently have a plan to fence the entire property.
Okay. But you understand what I'm saying there. You want people to wander out in the woods, but they can't be wandering on other people's property.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned connectivity, for human movement, foot traffic, and the like. And I would also urge you to consider connectivity from a wildlife standpoint. And obviously, you've got a good north-south corridor there. Obviously, it butts up against the Turnpike, which isn't great. One of the things I would urge you is to consider ways to improve connectivity on the east-west corridor as well.
That's a good point. We'll take that note.
Can you just talk a little bit about lighting? Dennis brought up here about light pollution here, and I guess the industrial property here will end up having potentially shift work and lighting staying on later in the evenings here. I don't know what. Obviously, the residential communities are going to have lights on their driveways and impacts. I guess just overall, what your thoughts were about overall kind of impact for dark skies comparing the two uses.
Yeah, so the lighting technology these days is much better than it was, 10, 20, 30 years ago. And we would employ street lighting that has low impact, direct light, downward facing and not upward. For the industrial plan, that lighting plan has to be reviewed by the township's lighting consultant. And we would certainly work with the township and the neighbors to minimize light pollution as much as possible.
But I guess from a user point of view here, with the industrial use, I would assume you would anticipate potentially some of those users having nighttime workers. Is that what from I don't know what, and that's maybe a question here for Greg and Andrew here, if what you think would happen with the industrial use.
Yeah, it's hard, without knowing exactly who the tenants are. It's hard to tell what the hours would be.
And I guess during the approval process, that you have to go through a conditional use approvals for them, and that would be something the township could regulate here with limiting hours of operation here for that during the conditional use process.
Yeah,
which is a typical condition that's put on projects here. So.
Yeah, we understand.
I'll call it an environmental question. In the design and construction of the structures that we're talking about, the homes, to what extent and how are you exploring sustainability, energy efficiency, and resiliency in the design and construction of the homes?
That's a good question. In the proposed ordinance that we had, we were taking the homes to another level above and beyond what current building codes are, and that was specifically that the homes would meet Energy Star have the ability to be Energy Star certified. We've put that in the ordinance, and what that means: low VOC paints. It means using lumber from new growth forests that are purposely designed to be trees that are grown specifically for lumber for houses like this. There's different types of technology with the insulation values that we put in the walls and those types of things, as well as the actual mechanical systems that we put in the houses, air purifiers, the sear of the HVAC units, that kind of stuff.
Infiltration and air sealing.
Excuse me?
Infiltration and air sealing and going.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because Pennsylvania, time and time again, has neglected to adopt the entire residential portion of the International Energy Conservation Code. It's probably back on the 2004 edition at this point. Each code edition, we're going on to the 2021 codes right now, but the IECC is still back in the Stone Age in terms of residential. So you're planning to design these homes to really current energy standards.
Correct.
Okay, and you mentioned Energy Star. That's great, but in the event that the Energy Star program is shut down by the federal government this year, as it may be, what are your plans in that case?
So we would still want to meet those same requirements as set forth by the Energy Star. There are different types of certifications that a home can meet. Energy Star, National Home Builders Association has a green building standard. Happy to say that we were the first builder in the state of Pennsylvania to renovate a green home in 2010 and got it certified by the National Building Association. There's also LEED certified. A couple of those things are going to just simply be too expensive to build. That's where we thought Energy Star was good. It's above and beyond what current code is today, and it's really good use of technology.
Yeah, did you say that they would be able to be certified, or they would be certified?
Yeah, so the certification, we don't know necessarily the process, but they'll be built to Energy Star certification.
Okay. What about net zero ready?
Excuse me?
What about net zero ready?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that question. Yeah.
And when you're talking about these, you're for both plans?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
You mentioned in the context of the warehouse plan, you mentioned bringing natural gas up the street. Would that be done in the residential scheme as well?
Yes.
And I guess the intention there is to provide natural gas for heating and cooking and all kind of uses?
Yeah, the homes would have natural gas. I don't know exactly what the usage would be for each.
Okay. My kind of follow-up question or thought that I'm going to kind of continue to have through the process will be what the kind of long-term strategy for decarbonization is over the life cycle of the buildings.
Yeah, we're happy to talk about that.
So going along with the gas, how about our other utilities? I know Pico, you got gas, you got sewer and water. You were talking about sewer at the commercial plan. Now with this many homes and the aquatic center, everything all, are they able to handle your flow?
Yeah, so again, 120,500 gallons per day has been allocated to the property. I'm going to ask Jeff to jump in here just to talk about his discussions with regard to the different product types. Because as you can imagine, a sewer EDU for a single family home on an acre is probably different than a affordable apartment, necessarily the usage in that unit. So he's had those discussions with the professionals here.
So I've had several discussions with Bill Brown. Clearly, this is age restricted, so the sewage flows from an age restricted dwelling are not the same as a normal single family dwelling where you have a lot of little kids running around. And I've provided him with a lot of data from surrounding communities where they're age restricted and the flows were significantly less than what Uwchlan currently requires for a single family residence. So based on those discussions, we've kind of zeroed in on flows for the cottages and the apartments at around 150 gallons per unit per day. And for the singles, around 180 gallons per unit per day. That gets us to around 93,000 plus or minus gallons for the total development based on the current unit count, which is significantly less than 120,500. So we're good.
We also took a look at what prior communities within the township, the different product types had different sewer EDU values, basically how many gallons per day they used. And that was worked in with Jeff's analysis and his discussions with the sewer consultant for the township.
But do you have adequate capacity if you're forced to use the current township regulation for generation of sewage?
We didn't look at it from that perspective because currently the township has lower flows for other product types within the township already.
Okay. I don't know whether that answered what I was asking, but maybe. The township has, Dan, help me, somebody.
I'm going to defer to our sewer engineer.
There you go.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, we have sufficient EDUs available for the project. Most likely going eventually to the Downingtown area regional authority plant in the borough of Downingtown.
Do they have adequate at hand now, or do they have to buy EDUs? That's what I'm asking the question.
We have capacity currently for the residential and for the warehouse aspect as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
It sort of ties into the discussion of stormwater, but also backs into resiliency and things. You've talked about the stormwater and taking it underground. Have you considered using green roofs, especially in the warehouse? But I mean, you could in the natatorium in this, which is in both.
We haven't designed that yet. We haven't designed the buildings yet either. It's definitely something we could look at.
Did you say you were planning on taking the sewage out a couple different directions?
There are a couple different directions that we could take the sewer.
Yeah.
We haven't yet figured out what the best route is.
It's early days, okay.
Hey, Dennis, I don't know if you want to maybe ask the fiscal impact analysis for the residential. Can we jump to that at this point here for this too?
Okay.
Okay, so for the residential plan, the net township impact is $331,000. And for the school district, it is 5.4 million annual net.
So the school district really wants to see residential, don't they?
It would appear that way.
I will say in our negotiations with the school district, it was important to them that we were willing to do either type of plan, that we were willing to build a plan that was allowed under the current code, and that if we got pushback and the township wanted us and the neighbors wanted us to go towards a residential plan, that we would be willing to do either or. I think so. They didn't. We didn't do the fiscal impact studies until well after we had it under agreement.
Is there anything in the school district agreements here talked about mixed use? Is there ability to do any kind of commercial with a residential? Is that at all? Is that any part of your agreement?
That wasn't contemplated in the agreement.
Okay. Is that something the school district would permit if that was something that was desirable? I mean, do they care?
Yeah, I can't speak for them. I will say that we talked to the adjacent shopping center owner there, and they told us that this was the worst performing shopping center that they have in their portfolio. So that gave us a little bit of pause initially at looking at that mixed use. That's not to say that there isn't something that could work there, but it's not contemplated in our agreement either way.
How about the municipal impacts for the residential community versus the industrial, for need for emergency services, the type of what kind of impact that has for the community in that sense, for comparing the two, if you could speak to that.
I'd have to look back at the fiscal impact study details. I don't have that with me in terms of that, but we are going to be meeting with Station Chief of Emergency Services to kind of discuss our plans as far as servicing this, depending on the use. So we're working through that.
I was going to ask about that as well, because I think we'll definitely want to get an understanding of what the implications are to each of the emergency services, particularly the ambulance service, Uwchlan Ambulance, just because of the number of trips that are typically associated with facilities like this, their current staffing and volunteer base, their level of service, their availability, budget, all that kind of stuff, and how that would impact this, because it would presumably be somewhat significant. Not that it couldn't be dealt with, but it's got to be looked at and addressed.
Absolutely.
I was also thinking of having the applicant discuss the procedural items about what needs to go forward with this project here through the ordinance amendment and the master planning and such. If you guys could kind of talk through that process here, so to educate the public and the planning commission and all of us about how you foresee that being moving forward if this is the route that's chosen here.
So we have the conditional use plan that we submitted. We have kind of frozen that in its place so that not everyone had to start looking at that from a consultant standpoint until we knew if this was viable. So if we find out between now and next Thursday that, hey, this is a non-starter, then we would schedule a planning meeting for the conditional use plan next. If it looks like this ordinance is something that is looked upon favorably, then our next steps would be to fully engineer the plan, to finish these third-party reports, fiscal impact, and some of the questions about the drain on services and that kind of stuff. Try to get all that information so that that was submitted in time, really by the end of July, so that it could be reviewed by your professionals, and then we could be meeting end of August again in front of the planning board to discuss that kind of more formal submission.
So you mentioned fully engineered plan. Is that fully engineered, or is that the master planning associated with it here? How is that process?
I'll ask Rick on the semantics there.
Yeah, it would not be a fully engineered plan. We will not spot grade every single home proposed, but we will we'll take a closer look at stormwater, utilities. We will look at grading to make sure all of the intersections work, and that the roads can be graded to meet township standards. So it's more detailed than you see here, but it's not a fully 100% engineered plan that could be approved for land development. It's really just to look at the PRD amendment. So it's more detailed than you see here, but not fully engineered.
So the PRD ordinance gets advertised with the master plan, which is a partially engineered plan. In that analysis, the traffic gets analyzed and determine your connections and your road improvements that would be incorporated into that master plan, and then and that gets approved, and then you still have to go through a full land development application for your process. Is that how that would work?
Luke Allegreco for the applicant. You're 80% right on target with that procedure. We have proposed a PRD ordinance, which is a little bit different, as you know, than a land development ordinance. And what we would be doing is, if Greg feels comfortable that the residential is a direction which the township would like him to pursue further, we would submit a tentative PRD plan. Pennsylvania law and your ordinance, even your ordinance today, which allows for PRDs, requires not quite as much engineering as you would for a land development plan, because the whole concept of a PRD plan is to be flexible as you go from tentative to final. So we would be submitting a tentative PRD plan pursuant to the requirements of the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code. It'll have a lot of information. It will have a traffic study, traffic reports, fiscal, all those ancillary reports. There will be public hearings on that tentative plan, and we would intend to run them concurrently with the ordinance that allows for the tentative PRD plan. Kill two birds with one stone, because the same questions are always asked in the zoning amendment hearing that you would ask of a tentative plan. So we would run those hearings in the fall, early fall, and if the township approves the tentative PRD plan, then we would submit a final PRD plan, which that is extremely engineered and is akin to what you would expect with a final land development plan. So the procedure is a lot of risk here on Greg's part, because he is going to have to pay a lot of consultants to do a lot of work on the tentative PRD plan, not knowing whether the zoning will ultimately be changed to accommodate that plan. He won't know that until the hearings on the tentative plan and the zoning amendment are concluded. So there's a fair amount of risk on the PRD, the residential plan. There is less risk. This is just a legal perspective. There's less risk on the conditional use plan. But as the reason for these meetings, as I understand it, is to get feedback, gauge feedback, get comment, and so Greg can make an educated decision about what he does with the rest of his summer. Either dealing with us and engineering some tentative PRD plan and doing reports, or going to the conditional use route. Does that make any more sense?
Yeah, it's clear. I understand.
Dan, I knew you had a couple other things. Did you want to bring up? Doing pretty well.
If no one has anything else, I'd say let's take a 5-minute break and we'll conference over here and figure out what the next steps are.
Sounds good.
All right, everyone. Take a 5-minute recess.
This evening went a little quicker than we thought. We're going to continue this meeting on Thursday night at 6 p.m., which is open for public comment. Because of the way everything was worded, we cannot open public comment tonight because we let everyone know that it was going to be on Thursday evening. So I thank everyone for coming out. So at this time, hopefully I'll see everybody back on Thursday evening at 6 o'clock, and we will have public comment at that time. We'll reconvene. Thank you.